right. We've got a decent crowd, about a little over 20. Probably some more will come in as they realize, oh, it's tonight. I know I did that earlier. It's like, oh yeah, I have a meeting. So, all right, I'll go ahead and get us started. We have Clea Clagstad with us today with Circadian Consulting, and she's going to talk about rare plant projects. We've just been talking about some of the different opportunities for where to get plants and what we've got coming up in February. The 8th, we are doing our public meeting on seeds, seed catalogs, plugs, places you can find good resources for seed and plant material. And then in March, we are doing our annual symposium virtually. It will be the 19th, 20th, and 21st. We have a ton of speakers. We're so excited. I think this is our biggest speaker lineup that we've ever done with 7. And one of the Friday morning class is going to be also a CMP elective for any of those of you who are in the CMP program. That is going to be Tom Kimmerer talking about trees. And then we have people like Doug Tallamy and Larry Millichamp. And so, yeah, we're really excited about that. More information should be coming out soon. We're getting some of those times and locked into place. And then March 27th, we will have an in-person plant sale down at the First Horizon Pavilion, where they do the Chattanooga market, so that it's large enough that everyone can be spaced out, so that we don't have to worry about being overcrowded. It's like 50,000 square feet down there. So, and there's even some rumors about maybe food trucks. We're really excited about the idea of a coffee truck or breakfast. So yeah, keep your eyes out for all of those events coming up. Oh, I do believe we also have some room in our CNP class for February. It was filling up really fast. That class is on invasive species with Byron from Reflection Rotting. Yeah, it looks like we have a couple more spots in there for anybody in the CMP program. That's another opportunity for an elective. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Clea and let her tell us all about what she's been up to.
Hey, thank you so much for having me here and for coming to this talk. So my name is Clea Clagstad. I work for Circadian Consulting, started the company in 2017, and since have just been sort of continuing some of the environmental consulting projects that I've done similarly in the past. So just real quick, I started out working with Dwayne Estes at Austin Peay State University in 2010 and got a master's with him, and then sort of went all over the country working as a sort of a conservation biologist with the Heritage Program in Montana, and then over to Ohio and West Virginia and Texas and Canada and all kinds of other places, North Dakota, doing larger environmental consulting projects. And so I decided to come back to Chattanooga, one for the startup community, but also because my family is here, and decided to start Circadian to continue doing some of the project types that I was doing in those bigger firms on a smaller scale, because I think that's where you can make a lot of impact. So part of today is just going to be sort of an introduction to rare plant projects, the types of projects that consultants do and the public sector does with rare plants, and more specifically relocation projects, because that's sort of the last resort you want to get to. You never really want to move a rare plant because they're rare for a reason, but if you have to, it's a decent solution. So we'll talk more about that and the implications for land conservation, but I guess we'll just start there. So really there's 3 general types of plant surveys that you do in the environmental consulting sector. And the first is sort of a general plant survey. It's a baseline floristic assessment. You've probably heard them called a flora before, where you go to an area and you get a baseline idea of what's going on by collecting all the plants there and keying them out and making a list. And once you've got that list by area, you can kind of see, okay, here are the trees that I've got in the area, the shrubs and the herbs. So this whole habitat type is X. And you do that for a large area, and it gives you a baseline assessment of what's there. They're really helpful to have for people like me who take that information for impacts. So if a developer is going to impact an area and there's a flora that's been done of that area, my job got a lot easier. I know exactly what rare plants are there, what common plants are there, what invasive species are there. That really never happens in the construction projects that we work on, but because most floristic assessments are done on protected lands. But so that's kind of the first type of project. The second are the rare plant surveys, where you're called in because an agency has data about a rare plant population, and usually like a road is going in, so TDOT wants to know, what rare plants and animals are in the way of the road that they need to be mindful of while they're constructing. So that's where your rare plant surveys come in. And those can be done by the agencies themselves, the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, or an analog of that in a different state like the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, or a consultant like us. And then that kind of leads into these rare plant relocation projects, where if the last step is, we can't do anything with these plants other than move them out of the way because the alternatives are damaging to either the project itself or people in a different way, then the plants are the ones that go. So the plant relocations also tend to be a little more expensive and labor intensive, and there's not much literature to back up your findings. Like there's no real literature that exists for a particular species. So it's a lot of guessing, and it often ends up unsuccessful. And we'll talk about that more later, but that's kind of your project types. If you have any questions along the way, just ask them, by the way. So I guess with that, I'll just stop and ask if you have any questions so far. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's go. So here's an example. I mentioned TDOT before. The Tennessee Department of Transportation does a lot of projects in, I guess you could say, more sensitive areas, just because they're crossing streams with bridges. They're widening roads, which take a lot of space for a long, stretch of a way. So in this example, TDOT is stabilizing and widening a bridge. So what TDOT will do is it will contact permitting agencies, so the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and TDEC, so that's your feds in the state, and it will ask them, if you have any records of a rare species, we need to know about it so that we can do something about it, because TDOT's got what are called environmental commitments, where it's really all DOTs in the nation have environmental commitments where they're trying not to cause more environmental damage than is necessary to build the road. So what they'll do is they'll hand that project down to the engineering consultant that's working on the project. And if the engineer has an environmental consultant in their sitting in their company, then they'll give that project to them, but they often have to give those projects to other specialized firms. So that's something that we do a lot. And so what happens is we go out onto the site where the bridge is being widened. We look in their impact area to see if the species of note are there, and then we give that data back to TDOT, who makes a decision about that impact. So that's kind of the gist of these projects. It doesn't have to be TDOT, it can be another big sort of public organization. It can also be a private developer. So with that, I'm going to go into a little more detail about these relocations. So in our example, we're gonna pretend that that ODOT came, or TDOT came back, and they wanted a relocation done. So the impacts were unavoidable. They're working in this small area. They have to impact this population of rare plants. What do we do? So relocation projects in general are kind of, it's just kind of vague. That there are some books and some really good studies that have been produced and published that give you a methodology that's really scientifically sound to follow. But there is no state, you know, like you must follow this methodology like there are for delineating wetlands or streams or something like that. So plants really don't get a lot of protection unless you're a wetland plant, but most plants otherwise just don't have any protection. So when you're looking for literature about like how am I gonna conduct this survey, it's just really hard to find that information. So when you do find some resources that talk about it, it's a very experimental setup. It's real specific. If you've got X number of plants, you're going to want to, here's the methodology to deal with this in a relocation sense. And like I said, there's just no research available otherwise to compare your results to. So if you're dealing with a particular species in a particular genus, it's very rare that there's going to be like a piece of literature on a sister species that you can go to say, oh, this is how I should set up my experiment. So all of this is to say relocations are just really tough. They're tough to set up, and they do have a low statistical probability of success just because of all the factors involved, and we'll get into that here in a second. So
Leah, does that include like rescue groups? Can relocation include rescue groups, or is that a separate, would that be kind of a separate entity?
So tell me what you mean by a rescue group.
So for example, at points in time, I know in the past we've done with wild ones, we've had rescue groups where, for example, a developer is developing an area and they have plants that need to be moved or saved. We go in as volunteers, we sign paperwork and fill it all out, get permissions, and then we relocate those plants for them.
I gotcha. Yes. So that I think I might mention that a little bit later, but there definitely is room for that piece of the puzzle. So kind of once you set up the experiment, like once you know where you're going to take the plants and where you're going to put them, that decreases the labor costs considerably, and that can really, really help the survival of a species if you're working on something like a private development. It can even bring down the costs of these more public projects like a TDOT project or something like that. So yes, definitely rescue groups are very helpful for the actual relocation work. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
okay.
Kind of. I think Bill had a question too.
Yeah, my question is back on the surveys.
Sure.
So many of the rare plants are spring ephemerals.
Yes.
How can you, if they want you to do the survey in the fall, you're kind of out of luck.
Yes, that is the case with wetland delineations, stream determinations. There are certain environmental projects that really don't need to be done outside of the growing season. And typically, if you're working with an organization like a DOT, and you tell them, look, I can't do this project unless we're in season because there's no chance of survival if I do this in the fall, typically they'll say, okay, let's wait and we'll let you do your thing and then we'll get to the construction. In private development, it's a lot less likely just because the timelines on those projects are much shorter and you're working against every financial incentive for that developer to build that project. But yeah, it sort of depends on the project, but that's definitely a concern, is timing. Does that answer your question, Bill?
Yeah, basically you're out of luck.
You're kind of out of luck. Yeah. And there's no legal ramification as it stands right now. There's nothing anybody can point to say you're not following this law. And that's really the big problem here, is that plants just don't have any help from the law.
Yeah, there isn't much protection.
Yeah. It's very sad. But
Well, a lot of times though, if there is a rare plant, you've got a clue because it's been identified in a survey in the past. So, I mean, how often do you come across surprise rare plants as opposed to the common plants that are usually what we do in a rescue? In a rescue, you're doing hearts of busting, you know,
yeah,
isn't rare.
I mean, finding a rare plant isn't uncommon in Tennessee. I'll just use Tennessee because it's the diversity here is so much greater than in the West and in the North. But when you do, so I've done wetland delineations in the past, and on my data sheets when I'm turning in my information to TDEC, it will have we've got 250 Gratiola Fluoridana in this wetland, which is a state listed plant, and it just that's my daughter in the background, sorry. But it just sort of depends on the location and who's doing the project, and if they're collecting plants and identifying them, and if they know kind of what to look for. I'd say it just depends on where you're doing your surveys, where you find these plants. You have to kind of learn how to expect them. Like you have to know where you're going. You have to know what those county lists say about the rare plants in that area. But it just depends on the project. Did I answer that question? Okay. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Clea. We're having a couple of questions to increase your audio a little bit.
Oh, well, I'll just speak louder because
Maybe sit a little closer.
Okay.
And then Eric and Suzanne have a question that says, under the current navigable waters protection rule, are the rare plants harder to protect, especially on private lands?
So the navigable waters rule, as far as I understand it, really doesn't, I would say if rare plants had a chance, it was before the Trump administration, changed the rules. The navigable waters rule doesn't really address plants because that's sort of a federal mandate. So TDEC is the one that has the power to regulate wetland plants, and they regulate wetland plants because they touch the water. So when you've got a plant in a wetland that is listed, then TDEC will come in and say, hey, this is a wetland of exceptional quality, and if you're going to impact it, your mitigation is going to cost a whole lot more. So that's kind of how we protect plants somewhat in wetlands, but the navigable waters rule is related. It's just doesn't really impact plants. Yeah.
I hope that answered their question. And Terry Joyce has put in the comments a story where she had someone give her, I think it was 2018, a large clump with lots of soil of the yellow lady slippers.
Okay.
And is wondering that if where they are now, let me look at that. Okay, where they are now, they have they didn't come up and bloom in 2020 and seem to have a fungus. Is that something that you have any experience with? You might have any ideas for her on what could be wrong?
So lady slippers, so orchids generally are, and you probably know this, they're really picky about where they grow, and they have a lot of help in the soil. They have a lot of mycorrhizal fungus that they use to collect more nutrients, and they're just very specific about where they grow. So
yeah. She said they bloomed very nicely in 2019 and had loads of the original soil delivered with them.
Are they outside?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know enough about that specific plant to help you out with that one, but I would just say that it's got to be something about the amount of light, or if it was a particularly wet year and they got drenched or something, I could see them not performing well there. But I would definitely wait. I would definitely see, you know, that I'll mention this later. There are certain plants that don't produce stalks for 17 years. So it just may, I know the small world pogonia only comes up, you know, once every decade, it seems like. So it just may be just the wrong year. So you may just want to wait another 1 or 2 and see what happens.
Thanks for indulging us. We'll let you get back to your screen.
I know this is kind of probably really technical, but you know, I don't know.
That's why we're here. We love that. So
good. We'll keep on with the questions. They're good questions. Okay, so before I continue, just to give you some information, you guys have done some rescues, so you may know a lot of this, but some of the terminology that we use in relocation species projects are refer to the sites. So the site that contains the rare species that you're moving is the donor site, and the site that gets the plant is the recipient site. There are also some terms for relocations that I didn't know before I got into this. So if you see, can you see my mouse? I don't know if you can see my mouse. You can, okay. So you've got your, in a translocation, these are kind of the different types of relocation studies. So a translocation is where you're moving a plant to the same site. So we did one of these for TDOT where we moved like some rare plants from one end of a wetland to the other side of the wetland, which was huge. And so you're moving the same amount from one area to the other. A relocation is where you're taking plants out of a habitat, like 20 miles down the road into a totally different spot. A reintroduction and augmentation refer to the native range not having enough plants or not having any plants there that used to be there. So if you know that, you know, Cypripedium lady slipper used to be in a particular location and it isn't there anymore, you will reintroduce species to that native range. That's a reintroduction. Augmentation, just like the name sounds, is just buffing up that population with a new crop of species. Oop. So, okay, so that's sort of our terminology there. The other things that I'll talk about here are some details about relocations that may influence the success of your project. So species variability is a huge one. So this is where you need that literature, and this is where things can get a little difficult. You know, you need access to JSTOR, you need to contact the professors themselves, who are usually really helpful and willing to give you those papers. But sort of what Bill was saying, if it's a small little annual, that's a much different story than if it's a perennial. If you've got a giant rhizome and those things are super easy to move, that's going to be a pretty successful project as opposed to a spring ephemeral or annual. So then the other question is, can you find a paper where somebody has relocated one of the sister species? Because if that's the case, it will make your relocation potentially a lot more successful, because this person over here who's published the results has already, you know, tripped over some of the things that you're about to trip over in your project. You can tell what was and what was not successful. You can look at the timing of the fruits and the flowers within each species. That changes how the projects are done. And then this other piece here, the suggested minimum viable population size. If I'm moving a spring annual and I need 400 plants to make it a viable move, then, and I only have 20 that I'm moving to a new site, that's probably not going to be a successful project, as opposed to a project where the suggested minimal viable population size is 2. So that number is incredibly difficult to find for a rare species, because people just don't study this stuff. And if they do, it doesn't exist in published literature. But this can really influence, you know, the success of a project. So just here's that example. We have Trillium Lancifolium, And while we don't know much about this particular species, we know that it will sometimes wait as long as 17 years to produce a flowering stalk. I don't know what you would do with that in a relocation, but, in terms of your monitoring and your success, that you're recording about the monitoring of that population, that's just going to throw your results way off if you're not ready and you don't know that part about that species. There's some other things about species variability. So Gratiola Fluoridana, which I mentioned earlier, is a little tiny spring annual, and it has super thin, delicate roots. So when you're moving it, you have to get a huge clump of soil in order to make that move successful. Whereas if you're dealing with some Trillium species or other species with a giant rhizome, a carex, or a grass, you just don't have to worry about being as delicate with the roots as you would an annual. The same is true of site variability. So this is also a huge reason why you really need to know what the site kind of does throughout the year. The hydrological regime is one of the biggest, I guess I'll say it can really impact your success. So you want to if you're relocating a species, if you're taking a plant into a completely different site, you really want to make sure it has a very similar hydrologic regime. The geology and the soils can affect the pH of the recipient site, and then obviously if it's wetland or terrestrial. And then this microhabitat idea here was something that we had to pay a lot of attention to with this particular move. If you see these little plants don't like to be in the middle of the pool. They kind of prefer the edge of the pool. So we didn't move anything, directly in the water. We just kind of kept their feet wet. And then surrounding vegetation, are you putting it right under a tree, or do you need to put it more in the sun?
Can you talk a little bit before you go farther about the hydrological regime and what that is specifically?
Yeah, so I think this was a paper that I read on wetlands specifically. So if you're moving a wetland plant, one of the biggest indicators of success, or I guess the most success you'll have with that relocation is matching that hydrologic regime. So for this particular example, and I'll show you a picture of the seeds in a minute, Gratiola has really tiny seeds, and when they are mature and ready to drop, they kind of shake around in the capsule. And so if you've got a big heavy rain that hits that capsule and pops all those seeds out, they're gonna germinate in place. If you move that particular plant to an area that's a little drier and doesn't have as much rain or doesn't have as much access to that water, it's just not gonna disperse as easily. If it depends on the rain to then wash the seeds into a different location, that's not going to happen if your hydrologic regime isn't similar. I'll have to send you that paper because there's more detail that I've lost between now and then, but I just remember hydrologic regime is it's just a big staple of your relocation projects. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I would be interested to learn more about that. And then we have a question in the chat about removing a population. We'll use this one as an example. When you're removing a population of rare species, what percentage do you try to transplant? And do you record location for long-term historic records? Will the new locations be noted as a moved location? Yeah, what kind of monitoring is done for that when you move rare plants?
Yeah, that's a good question. It really depends on what the client pays for. So typically once we move the plants and we put them on usually, state land, then it's up to the state to monitor that population. So TDEC will actually be the ones typically who say, okay, here's this old population, and now we're going to go look at the new population and see how it's doing. So they know that it has been relocated. I would love to monitor the projects that we do, but I don't typically get access back to that land, and I don't typically get permission to do that. So once the project is done, I have to just hope really hard that it works, and that TDEC's going to take it from there.
Okay. And do they have sites where you can like look at that? She asked what type and timing of post monitoring of recipient sites do you recommend? Do they have any specifics about yeah.
Oh, like specifics about monitoring time?
Mhm.
Okay. It really, that depends on the species too. So,
Yeah.
so like for an annual, I would go back like right away, like probably 30 to 60 days. And then I'd probably go back every 6 months and then a year after that. Really for perennial too. I mean, I would recommend 5-year monitoring if you can get it. 10 would be great, but definitely 3-5 years would be ideal. Because then if something starts to happen to the population, you can take some of the seed back and try to grow it back again, and you know, augment that population later.
Well, there's another problem with relocations and letting people know and monitoring. There is just a lot of rare plant theft. So once you identify where the rare plant is and advertise it, that plant is really at risk.
That's true. Ginseng and golden seal and those types of plants, yeah. Yeah, and usually TDEC keeps that detail in their GIS layer, and I don't think they give that out. But yeah, no, that's a concern too.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions? All right, we'll keep going. Let's see. So this is just another comment on site variability. For this particular study, we found little pockets of like what seemed like coal that these plants just loved to live on. They just loved to put their feet on the roots of other plants. We really didn't ever find them without, you know, these big logs under the soil. You couldn't see them when you were looking at them, but when you started digging them up, they were, you know, just secured onto those pieces of wood under there that happened to be burned. So there may be some preference for burned wood, you know, who knows, but it was just an interesting note on the site variability that we found in this particular study. And I'm sure other rare plants, you could find the same thing. So basically what you're doing with this information is you're putting it in a report, right? Is what consultants do at the end of every project. But just as sort of a recap of everything, you're describing both sites. You want to know exactly what's going on the donor site and recipient site, and you're really focusing on your goals. So you've been asking some questions about monitoring and what success means, and it really depends on the species and you know, is it an annual or is it a perennial, and are you talking about success in terms of biological success or some other version of success? It really depends on what the project is for. And so then you're describing your methodology in detail, especially if you're going to publish this so that people can try to, you know, replicate the study. And then, yeah, monitoring is a big deal. If you can't monitor the project, it's almost not worth spending the money to do it unless you're able to do it for a, you know, unless you're able to use a rescue group to help you. I mean, it's good to move the plants if you can, but monitoring really helps you figure out what you're doing and what's going wrong or what's going well. So that's a huge component of these projects if you can get that done. And then, like we said, the timing is crucial. So if you've got a little spring annual and, you know, you can see these little seeds in here, that is completely rain dependent. So when we were moving these plants, we waited for them to get to that stage. And then we packed them all up in the car and we stuck them in the car and we watered them. And we were waiting for a storm. We just so happened to get one that day after we were done with the relocation, which worked really well. But yeah, you can see the little alphabetical numbers on all these flags. So we put those in the new wetland, and we took GPS points of all those so that TDEC could monitor them appropriately. And this is just another picture of sort of the after effects of that particular project. And some of the supplies you may need for a relocation specifically. We moved them in these little bins. We had thousands of plants to move. So we were very tired by the end of the day, but it just is the only way we could do it, you know, and not damage the roots or the actual plants themselves. Yeah, so then just another point here is if you can monitor these species after you move them, that's the best way to do it. We actually, I guess we tested about 20 or 25 individuals. So we moved them first in the spring, and we wanted to see over the course of several months if they were actually going to survive after we moved them, and these guys did. But then we moved the rest of them when they were closer to being in seed, just in case, you know, there was like a drought and they didn't like, you know, their feet getting moved, and so that was about all the monitoring that we got to do. But another good idea here is to track herbivory. If there's a bunch of privet in the site that you're moving to, you may want to consider, you know, removing the privet first, or, you know, putting that into your project somewhere where you get permission to do that, and then publish the results, even if it's up on a website or you know, a YouTube video or something. It helps all practitioners everywhere, even if it's not even in this state. You know, if it's a sister species, it just, all that data helps. So this is a couple of the last slides here. As you can imagine, the client and the land type really impact the results of your project. So if you're dealing with a public entity, we'll just keep going with the example of TDOT. You're working on a larger budget. It's usually, you know, you're being asked to do the project because of an organizational or environmental commitment. You've got professionals who are conducting the work, or at least overseeing a lot of it. The volunteers can assist. And then sometimes members of the organization will come out and help, or just be really interested. They wanna see what you're doing. And usually if it's a public project, you're definitely moving wetland species, but they make a lot of pulls to move non-wetland species as well. We did a project on a river bluff, and there were just, I mean, thousands of rare plants. We haven't moved them yet, but they were really, really concerned about them. So if they're not going to avoid them, that's probably the next step. But anyway, they care a lot about all plant species. And then your chances of publishing those types of results are better, because if it's a public organization, you know, they're not as long as you're not giving the location away. I think, you know, it's good to publish those results so that people, you know, can look at that later. If you're working with a private developer, this is just insanely difficult. Their budget is very small. You know, they're doing the project because TDEC told them that they had to do the project. You almost have to depend on the goodwill of other people to help you with those projects, like the Tennessee Plant Conservation Alliance and wild ones, just because otherwise it's just financially infeasible. If it is just a regular plant that isn't a wetland plant, let's say it's the small rolled begonia, which is like the rarest orchid east of the Mississippi, you know, you're pushing to get that done. If it's a wetland plant, TDEC can usually step in, but if not, it's just really hard. So the chances of publishing that type of work are 1 in a billion, I would say, with a private developer. But so here's what I say when it comes to land conservation. Go find your rich neighbors who have 40,000 acres of land, and stroll around their property with your mojito and your plant key, and start looking for these rare species. Because if we can find rare plant species on private land prior to impacts, I think we have a lot more it'll be a lot easier to conserve those species, and I say that because I think a lot of studies have been done on public land, and there's so much private land locked up that nobody has permission to survey. So, I mean, until we get onto that land to look at it, it's just hard to say what's out there. For example, these are two species that have been recently discovered, I would say in the last 5 years for the Trillium, and I think last year for Wofford's eyelash mint, or Blophilia woffordii. And these are two new species to science, so they're rare and new. This isn't to mention just the rare species out there that you might find on private land. So I guess with that, I can take any questions. I think that's my last slide. Yeah.
I really like that eyelash mint. Yeah, that's a cool plant. Yeah, so one of the things you mentioned was volunteers. So how do you get more volunteers? How do you let people know that you need help? Or, for example, like when you're working with TDEC, would they be the people who went out, or Tennessee Plant Conservation Alliance? Are those the groups that would look for volunteers, or do you use volunteers?
Well, I would definitely use a group of volunteers to help me with the labor. And I mean, probably to get wild ones involved in these projects, you could talk to the Tennessee Department of Transportation themselves. You could talk to TDEC. You could talk to other large organizations. Really, any engineering firm would probably listen to you, trying to tell them, hey, we've got this service that we're willing to help you with if you'll just let us, look at the parcel. I could see, certainly for like a road improvement or something like that, that would be really helpful. In the future, if an environmental consulting firm knew that you all were here and interested, if we found a listed plant species in like a routine wetland delineation or something, I could talk to my client and say, hey, I have a group of people who are committed to helping you for a very low cost, just to conserve this species. So if you let us, come in and take the plant out of your hair, then we'll move it over here where it's safe and it doesn't impact your tight budget. I think that's probably the most helpful way to go about that.
Terry's asking if you could go back to the last slide of the new species.
Sure.
Well, I have a related question to the volunteer one. The likelihood of having that rare plant and transplanted are pretty slim. But when you are doing that survey and you find lots of native plants, how do we get connected with the developers so we can go in and remove the common plants before they do? That's what the Native Plant Rescue Squad does. The common plants are going to survive, but they won't survive getting bulldozed. Do you have any suggestions on how to look into local developers?
Developers are very tough, and they are kind of skittish, I'm sure, as you know, of anybody who's starts talking about conservation, because they, even if it's a good idea, in my experience, and not all of them, I mean, most of them really do want to help and do the right thing, but they don't want anything to happen. Like, they don't want the project to roll into a bigger project and a bigger project, and then more people find out, and then everybody throws their hands up and says, oh, we shouldn't do this development because of X, Y, or Z. That's the biggest pushback that I see when I'm talking to developers, is they just want to go in, do their thing, and come back out. So I think if you could approach them, and I'm happy to help you, work through this, but I would say if you could approach them with a succinct you know, here's what we're going to do. This is the only thing we want to do. We're going to come in for a, you know, a day. We're going to have 50 people out there taking all the native plants out, and then you're never going to see us again. I mean, I think if I think with the right set of developers, you could certainly get that going in Chattanooga, and sort of try to popularize that idea so that more developers will jump on board with that. I think that would be a great idea.
Chattanooga's been notoriously bad about that.
Really? You had experience trying to do this before?
I wasn't involved with it at the time that they did some plant rescue, but it was not long lived, I don't think. So yeah, it's something that keeps coming up as a we should do this, we want to do this. And so if anyone is interested in being in charge of such things, just let me know.
And there's definitely a way to talk to these guys. I mean,
yeah,
they like I said, they want to do the right thing. I think it's just a matter of how you approach them and what you say. And I would love to sit down with anyone who's interested in talking about that more, because I think that's a great idea.
That sounds great. Charlotte's saying, so Charlotte Freeman has like the most incredible spread of blue-eyed Marys in her yard. And that's her background right now. But she's asking if they're still considered rare.
I'd have to look that up.
That rolls into another good question about what are good resources to find out what plants are rare in our area.
I feel like blue-eyed Marys might still be rare. So there's a lot of websites I can send you. So the one that I use the most is the TDEC. God, I haven't been to the site in so long because I have all the information downloaded. But TDEC has a list of rare plants per county. And so if you're looking for state and federally listed plants, if you just Google TDEC rare plant, it'll come up with a viewer, and you can use a little drop-down list per county. You can tell it to give you the data in different ways, and you can download it from there.
They have a PDF here.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I use for Tennessee. And then I've actually gone back and put pictures with it. So like I've been doing a lot of work in Coffee County and Franklin County, so I've got a giant list of it's like a PowerPoint with all these pictures and some key characteristics and things like that help distinguish, you know, the rare plant from the non-rare plant. I'm trying to think. I don't know that there's any publications that exist like that otherwise, but that rare plant viewer is what I typically use. And then I guess I'll say NatureServe. If you're anytime you're working with plants, the NatureServe NatureServe USDA plants database is what you check your nomenclature against. So for example, I was keying out a dogwood the other day, and dogwood has been divided into cornus and this thing called Sweda, which has probably happened recently, and maybe longer ago than I think, but the names are changing all the time. The USDA plants database will keep you up to date with plant names.
Okay. And that's okay. There's a few different links. So it'd be plants.usda.gov, it looks like.
Yeah, I usually type in just USDA plants database, and it'll pop up.
All right. Does anyone else have questions? You're a quiet bunch tonight.
That's okay. Well, I appreciate your time. It's been fun talking to you.
Oh, I think I heard somebody.
Oh. Might have been my cat. I don't know.
All right. Well, it doesn't sound like anybody else has questions for you. thank you so much for talking about this. Rare plants are usually, as I live in the city, not something I run across as often as I'd like. I believe the Scutellaria montana was found over in Hickson, right off of, what's that road? Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, it was over in an area that they were talking about developing, and then changed their mind once they found out there were some rare plants over there.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a good information to have.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if nobody else has questions, Clea, we appreciate you and thank you so much for talking about. Oh wait, here we go. Charlotte's got a question. Lady trusses, are they rare? One is growing in the lawn across the street from me.
Ladies' tresses. Let me look up the scientific name because I'm getting that.
No, that one.
It's an orchid, I know.
Oh, thanks, Charlotte.
Okay. Oh, are you talking about Spiranthis, the twirly one?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I think there's one lady's tress that's listed. It's got a green lip in the middle of it, but the other ones typically aren't, and they're kind of difficult to key except for that one. Is that right? I'd have to look that up, but there's not a lot of rare ones of those. They're just really uncommon. The most common one is Vernalis, Spiranthis vernalis, which has a really tall spike of flowers at the top. But there's a bunch of other ones, and if you really want to know what you're looking at, I recommend like kind of like looking at it under a dissecting scope with a key, which is.
There was one stalk, it was about 8 inches tall, and I'm sure it's going to get mowed down with the first mowing of the spring. So I was just wondering what to do about it.
Well, if you can catch it before they mow it and like get a real close-up picture of the flowers to me, I think my email address is on here somewhere. I'll try to take a look at it.
Your email's at the bottom right corner. Yeah, it'd be really cool, Charlotte, if you could just walk over and say, hey, can I have that plant right there?
Well, I'm sure I could. It belongs to the church, and our pastor actually found it and called me to come
Okay.
and see it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So I've got some pictures of it. I'll see about sending it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll do my
Cool.
best. Those are
Okay. I was surprised at how small it was. I was expecting them to be much bigger because I'd never seen one in person before.
I want to say there's like 12 to 15 in Tennessee, and I don't know how many in Eastern Tennessee, but I there's a couple it could be, and it might be rare, but I would assume that it's just one of the less.
Well, I thought maybe I might go down and put a fence around it or something.
Well, I'll help you do that. That sounds great. They're really pretty flowers.
All right. I'm not but about 15 minutes from your office. So.
Okay, yeah, we definitely meet there.
Yeah, and is that a fall blooming plant?
Mostly yes. I start seeing them come up in like July, but I wouldn't. I'd have to look up. There might be some spring species, and there may be some that come out later in the fall. I'll have to look that up.
Right.
Do you all have the Tennessee plant key, or do you know of Weekly's key? I don't know how in depth you want to go with keys, but there's one that came out from Weekly, Alan Weekly. Are you familiar with him?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, he's got that giant. You can go to the.
Yes, that was the new one. Didn't he do a new? It's like 1,700 pages.
Enormous.
It's
Pull my
huge.
whole computer down. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna see if I can spot that or if I can pull it up real quick.
If yeah, his key is I think you can get it. So if you go to the website, it'll let you select like what type of key you want. So you can just get a particular state. You can get the whole thing, and that way it excludes certain species. You don't have to tease through that in the key. But if you ask them, to if you tell them who you are and what you're doing, you can just get download a free version.
Yeah, they offer it free with requests for donation if you feel so inclined. You can get it downloaded anyway, and the PDF version if you, yeah, and then print it yourself.
He's also got a really, really active Facebook group, and really active, being like every other day, even in the winter. And people post pictures of plants and names. I mean, it's just the coolest group.
Yeah.
Well, the definitive book on that is Guide to Vascular Plants of Tennessee by the Tennessee Flora Committee, and the Tennessee Native Plant Society sells that book.
That's another really good one. The one problem I have with that key is if you don't have the flowers, sometimes they don't give you vegetative options, so you can't take the leaves and just try to, that's why I would definitely, that's a super awesome key. It's got a great Carex key and all kinds of different other things. The weekly key sometimes has, really more often has those vegetative keys. So if you can't find it in the Tennessee key, then weed through the weekly key, because you can key out blueberries a whole lot more easily, dogwoods, things like that.
Also, the weekly key happens to be free, whereas this other book is pricey.
Oh yeah. What was the name of that again, Bill?
Guide to the Vascular Plants of Tennessee. Now, these books are deadly dull. I mean, you don't look at this, expect and get nice pictures of the plants to identify them. It's all text. It's all according to the key, and you got to really, really want to do it. I'd highly recommend your app on your phone with a photo.
I'd love to have a key party. If anybody wants to key out a plant and they're like, I want to gouge my eyes out after 20 minutes, just send me an email and I will be like, yes, let's do this. It can be really daunting, but it's fun once you get the hang of it.
It is. And it can, at first it is a little much. So I put in a link in the chat, and for any of you who have not ever used the chat, like saved the chat before, if you're using a PC, or I think a tablet, you can save the chat so you can have those websites and things like that, that we put in there. I put the weekly key that came up in search. I'm not 100% sure it's the newest one, but it's about 1,200, 1,300 pages. And then a link to that Vascular Plant of Tennessee book.
I'll email some of these to you too, just so you have them. If you want to send them out, if there's something that you missed or that I missed to see.
Sure. And if any of you that are still with us want to put your email address in the chat, then I can email those out to you. So the herbarium site is a PDF. It goes to a PDF, not an actual website.
Oh, there should be a site that lets you type in a bunch of information.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is that what you're talking about? And then they pop the PDF. Okay, yeah, that sounds right.
The newest key the weekly has is online currently and hasn't been published in a PDF, because that 2015 is the old version.
Yeah.
It's huge, but not near as huge as the new version.
Yeah, the new version was like 1,700 pages, I thought, but I have seen it online, but I'm not 100% sure where it was. So
I'll send that to you. I think I got that from the Facebook group, but I'll send that to you in a link.
Yeah, I think that's where I initially got it too. The news was from the Facebook group.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, and then we have people putting their email addresses in there for me, so we can send that out.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thanks for offering to.
What's that?
Oh, I said thanks for offering to send us some additional data.
Yeah. One day I'd like to publish these little PowerPoints that I keep making. I mean, they're really great.
Yeah.
They've got like pictures, and I go through the Tennessee key, and I try to, put in there, what's the difference between this rare plant and the common plant. And got, anyway, none of the pictures are mine, so I don't know how I would do that, but they're really helpful in the field. So I don't know, maybe I'll just share those behind the scenes and just,
Yeah.
that's
All right.
too. So, yeah.
Cool. All right. Does anybody else have questions? I think it took a minute to warm them up a little. If not, we're hitting 7 o'clock, and I just appreciate you being here with us today, Clea. Very good information.